Greetings, old school magic players, and welcome to the Four Horsemen. Greetings, old school magic players. Welcome to another episode of the Four Horsemen. I'm the Chadster, and I'm joined here tonight by John Eccleberry and Tim Kincaid, and we're going to be covering a part 2 of a 2-part video series of our original Four Horsemen tournament number 1 deck reviews. Wild West of the Four Horsemen, plus the dual lands, going all the way back to what we were running in the very early Four Horsemen days. And players playing in this tournament will get to experience a bit of what it was like when Four Horsemen first launched and experience the Wild West. John, you were here in those days. Tim, you came a little bit later. What would you say characterizes the early days of the Wild West, John?
There were a couple pretty dominant decks. There's, of course, robots was kind of everywhere, but there were several different versions of it, so that was kind of neat to see. Pretty much any color combination that you can think of for those guys. There were a lot of tax edge variants, but again, people got kind of creative with it. So you'll see a real twist on that archetype, and you'll see a bunch of other weird stuff too. People just trying to, play funky monocolored decks and play. We allowed almost everything. Like, the only things we really curtailed were the set hosers and Library of Alexandria, because that card's just so overpowered. But everything else was fair game.
Yeah, and Tim, as a later addition to Four Horsemen, you didn't get to experience these early days where, we were very much experimenting with something completely new. What do you anticipate and think about the Wild West, having never played it before?
It's probably going to be like night and day from what I've been playing the past year with the Four Horsemen group. There's quite a few cards that are restricted and banned currently here in 2025, and looking back, there's just anti-cards banned, and like John said, the Loa and the 3 set hoser cards are restricted, so just 4 restricted cards. Trying to brew up a deck for this has been quite a challenge, whereas before I could kind of just look at any kind of spicy card and kind of brew a deck around it, but now I feel like, I have to be able to deal with 4 mana drain, or I've got to be able to deal with 4 workshops, or et cetera, et cetera. There's just so many powerful cards that I have to look out for. It's interesting trying to build a deck.
Yeah. It really is. It really is a challenge. So for our viewers, if you'd like to join us, just check out fourhorsemanmagic.com, and all the details are under the current tournament sections for Tournament 21. We're going to be starting this in just about 2 weeks. We've got 32 players signed up as of today. We're hoping to get to 40. Let's take a look at just a close-up of the Tournament 1 banned and restricted, and then we'll get into the decks here. This original tournament run started all the way back in June 25th of 2022. It was our first tournament, and we've learned a lot since then. But this is the version of Four Horsemen that we started out with. And as John mentioned, all we restricted was the set hosers, City in a Bottle, Arena of the Ancients, and Golgothian Cylex, plus the library. And then all the anti-cards and Shahrazad were banned. So it was a very minimalistic banned and restricted list, just the bare bones. And it creates quite a unique brewing challenge, like Tim was saying. We've covered the first half of the decks in our part 1 of this video. So if you'd like to check that out, just go onto the YouTube channel and look for the part 1 of this deck reviews. We're going to pick up where we left off, which is Matthew Legoff's Moat Sphere Twister Tax Edge. John and Tim, what do you guys think of this brew?
You can go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, you go ahead, John. All right, I'll take a stab. Proxied Winds of Change. That's interesting. With I'm seeing the Chains of Mephistopheles Winds of Change. I'm familiar with this combo through like Swedish and things in old school. It's an interesting way to kind of mind twist your opponent with a 2-card combo, and of course that's why you see the 4 racks. And wow, and Winds of Change works really well. Has good synergy with land tax. You can shuffle those 3 extra basic lands back in and get 3 new cards, which that also has good synergy with the Ivory Tower. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. And then, oh yeah, the Moat Gravity Sphere. That's the old school. I remember that combo as a kid. I used to think that was such a powerful combo. If you get Moat Gravity Sphere, it's like no creatures can attack. Right. And this happens to be, it looks like a creatureless deck. So I see Tabernacle too.
That's right. Yeah, no creatures in this brew. Some cool handmade proxies, which is nice to see. Different versions of Winds of Change and a proxy for Gravity Sphere with some hand-drawn stuff and a couple of extra moats. Also, Chains of Mephistopheles up there. What do you guys think about running Chains of Mephistopheles? Because this is a card that Tim and I have discussed a little bit, that running with cards like the Rack could be pretty strong.
We haven't seen a whole lot of people try to run it. I mean, even though we've been a proxy-friendly format since the beginning, I almost feel like people forget about it because it's such a perplexing old card that not a lot of people had. You didn't really see it around much. And that's part of the fun of this format. You know, you can go and dig those cards out. And because we allow proxies, you can build a deck around it if you want to. And like Tim said, you're almost, mind twisting them because when you... Anytime they reveal a card, if they've already drawn a card, it just goes to the yard. So, like, if you Winds of Change, it just wipes their whole hand out.
Yeah, but it affects you too, right? That's the interesting thing about it is it basically any card beyond the first card of your draw step that you would draw, you have to discard a card effectively. And if you don't have a card to discard, then you mill a card, but it's all players. So it affects you too. What do you think about that dynamic in the Four Horsemen environment?
Well, there's not a lot of draw in the format anyway, but, it's going to shut down things like Sylvan Library and Greed. And, this is interestingly, this is a deck that has Ivory Tower, so you do actually want to have cards in your hand. So if you strip your own hand out, it's not the greatest thing in the world, but also I see that there's Land's Edge going on here, so you want to load up cards for that too. So you kind of have to play around it.
Yeah, that's right, John. The Lands of Edge up there, the Land's Edge up in the upper right, plus the Winds of Change, plus the land tax, the moat, the rack, the Ivory Tower. Also, he's got a few Chain Lightnings, a Ring of Maroof to go fetch a card from his board, and also the 4 Desert Twisters. You can see that Matthew is planning on hanging back, land taxing a bunch. He'll be on 1 or 2 lands for a long time. He'll get the rack in play. He'll get Ivory Tower in play, and he might have to Chain Lightning a few things, Divine Offering a few things. And when he's ready, when he's got his hand full of lands and his Ivory Tower in and his rack in and all that, and he's got the Winds of Change in hand, then he'll play the Chains of Mephistopheles and the Land's Edge. He'll discard all his lands to do all the damage to the opponent, and play Winds of Change afterwards, right, to make the opponent lose whatever they've got. They'll have to ditch their whole hand while he's already ditched his hand to damage with the Land's Edge.
Yeah, it's a neat engine, neat deck. He has ways to generate tons of card advantage or card disadvantage. It's almost like he's doing 2 different things, but
right.
But really, when you look at it a little deeper, it's almost like you said, an early game strategy and then a late game strategy, like gain a bunch of life, and then win the game with his combo. And one thing I'm noticing though is only 2 basic forests and 2 City of Brass to cast those 4 Desert Twisters, and with people running 4 strip mines, that might have been tricky to power those out.
Yeah, that's a very good observation, Tim. And in the first 3 tournaments, we we were trying to be purists. Number one, we were using old rules. We used the 94 revised rules, which was both fun and kind of challenging and a little bit broken. But we wanted to try it out, right? To have the old experience. Like, for example, tapped creatures didn't deal damage. You could do stuff during your untap and upkeep phase. There were weird things like that. You could, at that time, the rules were you could go below 0 as long as you came up to 1 life back, in the days of the old broken magic rules. It was a period of time where we were experimenting. And one of the other things we didn't allow at that time was dual lands. So the only lands that you could play were basic lands plus any of the lands that were in the Four Horsemen sets. So that's why you don't see dual lands in any of these decks. We added it when we did our tournament number 4, which is the one Brian Weissman played in. And so we're also going to allow the dual lands in our tournament 21 to kind of open up that experience that we had around the tournament 4 days.
That's cool. I expect to see a little more Blood Moon. I haven't seen a lot of Blood Moon, although maybe John Erkelberry had Blood Moon in his red deck.
I think I had it in the sideboard of tournament 1. I can't remember. I played a kind of a funky mono red deck that was mostly creatureless. It has there it is right there. Had Brothers of Fire for a mana sink and Trikes, and then just a bunch of burn spells.
I love it.
It does not look like I had played Blood Moon in the side. I did. Oh no, I've got them in the main board. Look at that. There's 3 of them in the main board.
I love it. I like Blood Moon main deck in this environment.
Yeah. 4 Infernos. That's so ridiculous.
That's funny.
It was a fun deck to play. And it did fine, except for I played round 1. My very first opponent was the guy that had the Winds of Change and the Chains of Mephistopheles.
Oh, you remember that match?
I just got wrecked.
So you actually remember this?
I was like, oh, this format might be a mistake. But otherwise it was pretty fun. I won my other matches, and it was a really fun deck to play. It was also a deck that we were testing the format, and so Chad and I probably played I don't know how many games. We played so many games, and I kind of in the spirit of the format, I actually proxied all 75 cards, even though there's a lot of cheap cards in the deck that I owned. And because I did that, I was able to just leave that deck in a box together. And so I still have that deck just chilling out in a shoebox someplace.
Oh, that's very
cool.
And
if I want to go back to, the Wild West, I can just pull it out and just play that deck. I mean, I could just play with that deck and tournament 21.
I just had a few questions. I know we covered this deck chat in video 1, but now that we got John here with us on the mic, I wanted to, and he can, you got to talk about your mono green beatdown deck with your flyers and stuff. And so it's cool to hear John's input on what he faced in the tournament. Like he said, he played against the Chains of Mephistopheles combo and it got him one game. But I was curious, like the Blood Moon, did you have any games where it turned a lot of your non-basics, like your mazes, off into mountains, and then you powered out this huge eternal flame? I was curious.
Yeah, that's the cool thing. If your Blood Moon isn't really doing anything in the game, you can just let it sit in your hand. But then, like you said, you can turn all your non-basics into mountains for a big eternal flame at the end. I mean, I think my conceit was I just wanted to play every card that did damage. So I played every red card that did direct damage, and even the artifact that does direct damage, and just wanted to kind of go to the face like that. And it was, I don't know, it worked reasonably well. You would think that the casting cost is a little high on some of this stuff, but the format was pretty slow in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And, it did have early factories, but also it's got 4 strip mines, right? So, you can kind of knock people off their game, and it's just a very different format. And then, of course, 4 Maze of this is completely ridiculous. You can just sit around and ward off anything that your opponent has. I kind of feel like, later on when we decided to clamp down and restrict some cards, people were like, oh, this format's insane. And it's like, yeah, but it's fun to do that at first. You can always restrict cards later. And you're used to playing in the really curated version of this format where we had, multiple layers of banned and restricted, over time, until we've arrived, where we are now with the most expensive version of that. But it was almost like there were too many auto includes in the Wild West, because like every deck was running, 4 strips and 4 factories, and many decks were running 4 mazes. And you were kind of seeing a lot of the same cards, but it's because they're powerful and they can really gum up the game.
Yeah, I was just curious. Were you able to cast Inferno mini games or Millstone? Did Millstone make a difference in any games?
Millstone was junk. I didn't bring it in hardly at all. I think it was mostly in there just because Dad and I had been talking about it a lot and brewing with it. I thought, well, maybe if there's some like hardcore control decks and they play like, mode or whatever, and I can't attack with anything, I can still mill them, or I can just get them with direct damage. But that's the thing. I have enough direct damage that what do I care if they play mode? Yeah. So I didn't really bring in the Millstones at all.
It's a fun looking deck. Thanks, John.
Yeah, it was fun to play. It was
a couple of quick comments, and then we'll get to some of the other decks. But John, did it occur to you? This is something I noticed looking at your deck photo. The set hosers are allowed, right? So the card City in a Bottle will destroy any card that was from the Arabian Nights set. So did it ever... I know that...
Well, it was originally printed in Arabian Nights. Mountain was printed before that. So if you're worried about all my mountains... It didn't really ever work like that, although that is really funny that I was playing the all Arabian Nights mountain.
Yeah, somebody actually mentioned this to me. They asked me this the other day. They were like, if I were to play all Arabian Nights mountains and someone played City in a Bottle, the ruling is if it's got the Arabian Nights symbol on it, it's destroyed, right? So would that wipe out all the mountains? And I was like, well, I guess technically, I didn't know exactly how to answer that question.
Yeah, I've heard people argue. You're not gonna bait me into that one. That's an age-old argument.
For the purpose of the tournament, we don't want City in a Bottle blowing up everyone's mountains. So, but you might not want to play with the Arabian Nights version, so you don't have to have that debate. But anyway, very cool deck. If you were to change something now, John, and run, knowing, kind of what you know now after 3 years of Four Horsemen, and having played through the Wild Wild West, what would you change if you were to run something like this?
Oh, I don't even think you could run this. It's just way too slow. And there's, you don't have the protections of having, quadruple maze or having, library to draw extra cards or just whatever. I don't know. Like,
what I mean is, would you run would you consider running mono red now in tournament 21?
Oh, in the new Wild West tournament?
Yeah.
I would probably do it just for fun. I don't know if it would be good, but like I said, I have this deck in a shoebox. I could just pull it out and play the exact same deck.
It seems like there is a chance for red aggro because so many of the decks that we've looked at depend on their utility lands, and they depend on getting the right colors. And like this deck here, Jeff Gross's Underworld Abyss Tax Tower, it's got to get triple black for Underworld Dreams and double white for Moat, and
it might have actually been this deck I played against and not the Chains deck. I think it was actually this one with the Underworld Dreams and the Winds.
Yeah.
Because he hit me for a bunch of life points when we were cycling cards.
Right. So
it was definitely this one, but
well,
this was also a cool deck. And I mean, when there's no dual lands other than I guess you do have the stones and the City of Brass to help out a little bit, but it's a lot harder to get to triple black when you have no dual lands, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so having the dual lands in, this will be a lot like Tournament 4. And it will open up a lot of multicolors, which were much, much more difficult to play in tournament number 1. But really cool to see and go back and reflect on your mono red deck.
I think my Blood Moons would be better with the dual land thing.
Yeah, it's like I was saying that in video 1 the other day with Chad, that Blood Moon just seems so potent now with all the dual lands, including these other like 16 powerful 4 of non-basic lands that people are including.
Yeah, especially if you run something like a red-green deck that's running like Elves of Deep Shadow. Like, I think if you could play a turn 1 Taiga or Forest and a turn 2 Blood Moon, with an elf of Deep Shadow coming out on turn 1, like that could absolutely make the game for a red-green deck. And it seems like that's a viable strategy right there. All right, so let's...
And we didn't see City, like you said, John didn't run the City in a Bottle main. I noticed Matthew Legoif here didn't run. He's got the one City in a Bottle sideboard, and that just seems really powerful to have. I guess he's not worried about other Arabian cards. He's got a couple City of Brass and Aloha in his own main decks.
Right. Yeah, you could argue that you should just run City in a Bottle in the main deck for every deck, and it's only one card. You pull it out.
Anything other than Arabian aggro that's leading super heavy on that set. I mean, in tournament 3, when we still didn't have dual lands and we still had the set hosers in, I just played mono blue robots, and I had the card that tutors an artifact out of your library, so you could get your one of City in a Bottle anytime you wanted it, and it was devastating against the field of aggro decks that were out there. Like we had to do something about it,
right?
And I don't know, I'm always in favor, I think, of restricting set hosers, especially when you're playing with a limited number of sets. We just banned Apocalypse Chime in our Forgotten Realms format because it's just no fun to have one third of the cards in your format can be just like wiped out by this single artifact.
Exactly. Arnold Avenels was the first deck in the alphabetical order here, and he's got exactly what you're talking about: the 4 transmutes and the City. But what's interesting is, you can tell as we've looked through some of these decks, these players put a lot of thought into this, and a lot of players were prepared both to play against Arabian aggro, like Arnold here, but also prepared to navigate around it. Like we see, which deck was it that was running Artifact Blast main deck? Like this deck right here by Brian Limbacher, right? We covered this in the video part 1. He's running a ton of Arabian Nights, but he's ready with 3 mana drains and an Artifact Blast. So he's prepared to navigate around that City in a Bottle, which is cool. So let's get into the rest of the decks that we haven't covered yet. It just so happens that after Matthew Legoff's Moat Sphere Twister Tax Edge, the next deck is actually Michael Scheffenacker's ATOG Shops Tron, and this is the deck that came in second place, second to Arnold. What do you guys think about this red-blue Tron deck?
I don't feel like this seems like a style that Michael typically plays. I'm actually kind of surprised to see this deck out of him, but at the same time, it is a lot of the most powerful cards in the format, and it's also some fun ofs. Like he's got those Ali from Kairos in there,
right?
We've got some Falling Stars, which is pretty powerful even early on.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. I like this deck. I think it looks pretty fun.
Yeah,
he's just got the red splash. We saw some blue robot variants, and he says let's play ATOG and Chain Lightnings just because it's my ATOG's bigger than any of your guys. So.
Well, he had a couple of early things like the Yoshin Soldiers that come out for 3, the clay statues that come out for 4, and the Suchis. The clay statues can regenerate basically infinitely. He's running, City in a Bottle main, a Mirror Universe main, plus you have all the Mistress Factories. So Michael was really leaning in heavy. If he can get out a few early artifacts, he knows he's going to be playing other robots decks. So if you have to sack a Suchi, you can use that mana before you go to your attack phase, right? Like let's say you play a turn 1 Fellwar Stone using a turn 1 Workshop, and then you can play turn 2 Suchi, right? And you play a turn 3 ATOG or something like that. You can attack with that Suchi, right? Or you can if you're gonna pump it, you can get mana out of the Suchi by sacking it to the ATOG, and then you can cast something bigger with that 4 extra mana, and your ATOG can get pretty large if you double up, like with a Fell War or something
Well,
like that.
only if you can play in that phase though. Like you couldn't sack it during the combat phase and then have it in your next phase.
You'd have to do it. You'd have to do it before you go to combat, right?
You know what's good at casting though is Inferno. He doesn't have that in this deck, but like you've toyed around
The
with
Suchi Inferno, yeah.
I'm just sitting here looking at these 4 workshops, just thinking about how bonkers the idea of a 4 workshop format is. Like,
Yeah.
if you're gonna allow 4 workshops, like everybody should just be playing shops, right? Like it's so dumb.
Yeah. Well,
Or strip mines and blood moons or something, but he doesn't have strip mines in his deck. That's interesting.
so he's not playing
Pretty
strip
wild.
mines, which is really wild. He's
just all in.
He's all in on just getting mana for himself.
Well, when you have 2 colors, you know, it's like you have to start worrying about it because he's already got, 8 colorless lands. Are you going to go up to 12 colorless lands? It starts to get difficult when you have 2 colors and some of them have double pips.
Yeah, that's very
Look
true.
at all the double blue pips on these cards. He's got Boomerang, he's got Transmute, he's got Mana Drain, and he's got the Djinn that's double blue. But I mean, they're all good cards. And Mana Drain is just also a card that's just too good not to play.
Yeah.
What's the card under his dib? Is that the sideboard on the far right with the boomerang?
Yeah, the sideboard's on the right. He's got 3 boomerangs, 3 falling star, 2 Ollie from Cairo. He's got
it's
2.
It's a
Sage.
Sage of Latham.
Yeah.
Oh, sages.
Yeah,
Okay.
2 sages.
So I like the transformational board where you can board in, dibs and the Saren dibs,
Mm-hmm.
the sages, the boomerangs. Like he can board in all those blue spells and take out, pretty much all of his artifact guys except for like Trikes and Clay.
Yeah, if he sees a lot of artifact hate, he can just kind of become a blue flyers deck, and they're not really going to be ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then they might have a bunch of dead cards in their deck too, if they've sided heavily into artifact destruction. Although he has, he's got some stuff to hit. He's probably going to leave Power Stones in. He's probably going to leave, Strikes in, like you said. But he can minimize it.
Yeah, cool strategy to make them have some dead cards. Yeah.
What's interesting to me, though, is this is definitely a multifaceted, transformative kind of sideboard. But you would think if he was going to do that, if he was going to move all his creatures in and move robots out, you'd think you'd see Shatterstorm or, something, maybe even Energy Flux that would give him an advantage against other shops' decks. But he doesn't really have that.
I just don't think he had room because he's trying to do this thing where he, like you said, it's kind of a transformational sideboard. I almost feel like with these color combos, like he should have had Spectral Cloak for his Ally from Kairos, but these might all be real. I mean, Michael has a nice collection of cards, so there might not be any proxies in here. This might have just been
these are all real.
Yeah, so like he might not have had Spectral Cloaks, to play.
Yeah. Well, really cool brew by Michael. He navigated and piloted this deck all the way to the finals. And he was beat by a more aggressive robots deck that we reviewed in the first video, Arnold's deck. So, hats off to Michael. And like we said, this was like a completely unexplored format. So, these players building such thoughtful and interesting and innovative decks goes to show their creativity and their understanding of these sets. The next deck is Mike Clements, one of the players that's been with us for a long time. FE40 founder and runs FE40 and also plays in Forgotten Realms and a few other formats. And Mike has often played green-black, and he was running green-black before a lot of the other players. So what do you guys think about Mike's green-black Urnum Angel Living Plane deck?
It's just what I would expect from him. Like it's all the cards that he like, and he kind of like experimented with this deck for a while because in later tournaments,
yes,
I remember him running a Living Plains black-green that also had Kumbaj Witches. They don't show up in this list, but they're actually pretty cool in that build because you can pick off their lands or whatever.
Yeah.
Kind of. But yeah, no, this is cool. I mean, he really likes Fallen Angel. Urnum, of course, is a card everybody's going to play. What are these cards that are scratched out over?
Yeah, so I was looking at that. If you look at the land counts he's modified his land count. So he ditched a Naf's Asp and a Vampire Bats, and he put in an extra swamp and an extra forest, because I'm sure through playtesting he realized he didn't have enough land, but didn't retake his picture, I guess.
Yeah. We that was a thing early on that we really tried to push the boundaries of like how much land to play.
Yeah.
I remember us both having decks that, you know, we had to up the land counts in at some point. But yeah, this is a cool deck, and this is a deck that gets refined over time, and we see, you know, more potent versions of it down the line. But even in this form, there's some pretty powerful cards here. You know, you've got Ashes to Ashes is just a crazy card. You know, you see very powerful creatures that come down fairly early, and you've got the Mana Dorks to accelerate them out. You can pump them with the Pendelhaven too, which is neat. I don't know. I like it. I like this build.
Yeah. He's got 24 lands, 22 that tap for mana, and then he's got the 3 Fel Wars and the 4 Elves of Deep Shadow. So, you know, he's really pushing hard to make sure he's got all the mana he needs. And it's okay for him to have, let's just say, a higher volume of lands, because part of his strategy is the living plane strategy. So he wants to have more land than his opponent, and he can sack those lands to the Fallen Angel, or, you know, do a land battle with you, and he's got Pendelhaven, so he can pump his lands and make them 1/2s. Or, sorry, 2/3s.
There's also some pretty cool, like, one-of in the sideboard. Like, there's an Arborea in there, there's a Mirror, there's a Gate to Phyrexia, there's the Scarwood Bandits that can steal artifacts. Like, he's really, like, he's digging deep into his collection and playing some green-black cards that don't see a lot of love always.
Yeah, it's really cool to see that. And really interesting brew. He's even got a couple of Whirling Dervish, some Stone-Throwing Devils, a couple Yoshin Soldiers. So he's got some things that can come out really early on turns 1, 2, and 3. He's got the Urnums for turn 4, and then he's got the Fallen Angels. If he gets an Elf early, or a Felwar Stone early, you could easily play a turn 3 Urnum, or even a turn 4 Fallen Angel. It's not a problem for this deck at all. So he's really trying to lean in on the speed. And then you pointed out those Ashes to Ashes. That card is absolutely a powerhouse, even though you're losing life. Exiling 2 creatures, just boom, they're gone, and now you clear the way for your Fallen Angel to get in or whatever. I think the biggest challenge that I see with this deck is I don't think Mike thought through like the horrible reality of like 4 Maze of Ith on the other side. He doesn't have any way really to get rid of. He's got 1 Desert Twister in there, maybe to take out their library. But
I mean, he does have the 4 strip mines, so yeah. Like he can deal with it that way potentially. And like, you know, those Ashes to Ashes are like pretty weak against a field of robots decks. But I mean, if you don't play against the robots deck, it's great. You know, you can really just like win a game in 1 strike by like clearing 2 blockers.
He can also play Living Plane and use Ashes to Ashes to remove 2 Maze of Ith from the game. So not only does he have the 4 strip mine, but he could Ashes their mazes with that combo.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
I would like to see, you know, maybe a couple of Blights or something like that, just to help get him over that Maze of Ith hump. You know, the strip mine is so powerful, and that you're tempted every time to, as soon as you get it, you play it, because if you strip your opponent's mana and they get it just the slightest bit mana screwed, then you've got this massive advantage. But then they slap down a Maze of Ith, and all of a sudden you can't get through their defense.
Yeah, my thoughts on this deck is he seems like he would do well against a Lantax archetype, because of he's got all the 1-drops and even being able to cast a Felwar Stone off the Eld. And he seems like he could do really well against Lantax with his little guys. But
agreed.
You know, it seems like he also has respect for Ball Lightning. He might have been thinking about that card when he included the Stone Throwing Devils to want to have a first striker. And then he's got all his artifact, you know, the Scavenger Folk and the Pixies to try to combat robots.
Right.
even the dervish and the angels for moats and anti-abyss cards. So he's obviously thought about a lot of things. One thing he didn't consider was any life gain with like John said, the life loss from Sylvan and Ashes to Ashes and the elves. And he does. I would think Diamond Valley. Just imagine how much life you could gain with a Fallen Angel or just a couple Urnham gens or even the Yoken Soldier.
Yeah.
Diamond Valley seemed like it could be a real powerhouse for this deck to be able to just draw more cards with Sylvan or use the Ashes efficiently.
I think there's another deck that doesn't have any proxies in it. So, like, I did, it's funny. I proxied all 75 cards in Tournament 1, and then in Tournament 2, I only played cards that I owned. And it was really funny when I was listening to the commentary that Chad and Brian were doing, and Brian's like, why does he have this card? Why does he have this card? And it's because, like, I don't own it, dickhead. Like, I would play that card if I had it, but, like, I'm just playing cards that, like, I had. And at the time, my old school collection was not as good as it is now. But even so, like, there's no real reason to buy 4 mana drains. There's no format that allows that. Like, any format that you play, 1 mana drain is all anybody needs to own.
Isn't that a proxy living plane he has there in the middle?
It might be, yeah. I think it's a living lands that he turned into a living plane.
Yeah, so he's proxy a living plane. So if he's proxying, you might as well just put a diamond. But anyway, to my point, if he's not playing proxies, then sure, I understand what you mean, though.
Yeah, I think the other comment I'd make there is, I'll be honest, Tim. Very few players, I think, realized how strong Diamond Valley was until the first couple of tournaments. And after the first couple of tournaments, it was really obvious. Whoever got Library first or Diamond Valley won. I mean, it was...
Well, not just Diamond Valley, but just life gain in general. Like, life gain's not a great strategy in most
That's formats. True. That's very true, John.
Like, life gain's pretty bad. Enchantments are generally pretty bad outside of the couple that you see ubiquitous. People say, well, what about Southern Library? And what about, whatever. Okay, cool. There's like 3 good enchantments, but like enchantments generally aren't that great. This format like highlights their use because like you can't really get rid of them. And so like all of a sudden they become, not everybody's running disenchant left and right. So they become a lot more powerful. And, people kind of complained early on. Obviously we've been around for 3 years, so it doesn't matter now, but people kind of complained about, oh, well, you can't remove these. And it's like, yeah, that's like kind of the point. Like these cards that aren't really the best, now are like super threats because like once they hit the board, they just stick around forever. And you can I guess you can Desert Twister it or Boomerang it or Time Elemental it or whatever. There are some answers in the format, but there's not just an easy disenchant, just like blow their whole strategy away immediately.
Right. I'm seeing a lot of Desert Twisters actually in most of these decks. Even Mike here has a Desert Twister. We had 4 Desert Twisters in one of the other.
Yeah.
We saw presence of the map. But even Dark Heart of the Wood would have been an interesting life game, but it doesn't really work with 4 Forest or even 3 in this picture. But if people are all running 4 Strip Mine and 4 Workshop, that negates the power of a card like Dark Heart of the Wood to offset the life loss of Sylvan and Ashes to Ashes, etc. But now I think we've seen Dark Heart become more powerful than it was in the Wild West T1 because of the restrictions of these colorless lands. So people are running more forest.
Right. Yeah. Really good observations there. Super cool brew by Mike. His green black Urnham Angel Living Plane deck. It's really spicy, and we're happy that Mike's been a long-term player and supporter. The next deck is a deck that very few people have seen. Nick Breyer was the kind of co-founder of 4 Horsemen along with me, and John was pitching in basically before we even got Tournament 1 off the ground. So this is Nick Breyer's Disharmony Flame Inferno deck. It was mostly proxies, also like your deck, John, and it was also mono red. What do you guys think of this brew?
This is similar to John's build. He's got 4 Inferno, kind of like you did, John. He decided on the same thing. It's cool.
There are some differences.
He went with tried to be more aggro though. He's got the ball lightning. Like, it's funny that I didn't play ball lightning. Like, I like that card. I love ball lightning, but I just didn't feel like it was that strong, and I just felt like it was going to get mazed or whatever. Like, it didn't seem like a great card. And there's like no good red 2-drop in this format. Like, there's ATOG, but like then you have to be playing like an artifact strategy, and if you're not, like, ATOG's not really good, and so you're left with like some real bottom of the barrel choices. You can play like the Kobold Taskmaster that's like a 1/2 for 2 that, like, I guess would pump your other Taskmasters. Move them out, you'd have 2/2/2s, but like that's just really sad. And so, you know, you've got cool cards like Bloodlust, but that's not very good if you don't have like dudes to pump. So like, unless you go 2-color and you play like Kurt Apes and little green creatures, and I guess you can use them on your factories, but you know, I don't know, the Bloodlust feel a little weird here. I mean, probably he got some kicks out of Bloodlusting Rook Eggs. Like, you can attack with a Rook Egg, and
I was thinking that too.
You know, that's kind of cool. But I don't know. I mean, there are some interesting things here. Like, he decided to play Disharmony, which is a card that I had never played in my life before this format. Like, I don't know if I had even seen it. I own some now, but you know, that's a neat card. That's another card that's good with Diamond Valley, or really anything.
Yeah, super good.
Right. Yeah, I wish he had Diamond Valley with that. And like the City in the Bottle there is there in the sideboard, and that's to me a great way to crack your Ruck Eggs. And he doesn't have any other any other Arabian cards that I can see. So I would think including that city would have been really nice in a Ruck Egg mono.
Well, and the Diamond Valley cracks the eggs too. So like, again, this is another deck that like really wants that card.
Yeah, and an interesting ruling on City in a Bottle, since the Rook token wasn't printed in the Arabian Nights set, the Rook token is actually not killed by City in a Bottle, just the Rook Egg and any other Arabian Nights card.
It just kills it just destroys cards anyway. It doesn't destroy tokens.
Yeah.
The way that it works.
I think
it's perfect for cracking Rook Eggs.
Right. Yeah, you're right. He should probably be running that main deck. Plus, Serendib Efreets and, you know, Urnum Djinns and Kurt Apes are going to be everywhere, so you could make that argument. I also think that if you're going to go the Blood Moon route, you should probably try to get it early. These Bloodlusts don't really seem all that great. He could have easily just run 2 more Blood Moons and maybe a couple of Fissures or something like that could also be just as good, or even 2 more Detonates, you know, and go up to 4 Detonates.
Yeah, or Goblins of the Flarg or something.
Something, right?
Blood Moon.
Yeah, because the problem with Ball Lightning is actually Maze of Ith as well. So if they have a Maze of Ith and you don't have your Blood Moon out, you're like, oh shit, I'm playing my Ball Lightning into their Blood Moon, right? He basically has to wait till he has Blood Moon and can get it in play before he can play Ball Lightning if you're staring down 4 mazes. So I bet you that's part of the problem that Nick ran into. If I switch over to, I've got the Four Horsemen site up right now. Some of the things we've been doing, John, Tim and I, in the first matches, we've been looking at their standings because they're published on fourhorsemenmagic.com under Tournament 1. So this deck here with Nick Breyer, he came in. There were 40 people that signed up. There were 35 players that completed all their matches, and Nick came in 28th. So he didn't do all that great with this particular brew. We didn't check on Mike Clements and Michael. We talked about Michael Scheffenacker. Matthew LeGolf. Let me see where he came in. Matthew LeGolf came in 11th, actually. So Matthew,
pretty strong.
Matthew did pretty strong with this Moat Sphere Twister Tax Edge. But, you know, the other thing, John, I don't know if you remember this, Tim and I talked about a little bit in the episode 1, was we did 3 rounds of Swiss pairings, which were just random pairings. There were no geo groups or things like that. So Teleria randomly paired everyone with to play 3 games. And, you know, so each player played 3 matches against 3 other opponents, and that was it. So there's a lot of randomness in some of these decks, which look really strong against like robots and other things, they probably didn't get paired up against those. And so, you know, the randomness of the Swiss pairing, I think, also influenced which decks did well based on who they were facing down. Michael came in second, and then let's just check Mike Clements real quick here. Mike Clements came in... Where is Mike? Mike came in 20th, 1-2-0 with this deck.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, with only 3 forests, I don't know how many Pendelhaven he had, but it didn't seem like it was quite enough green.
Yeah, he was probably missing
like,
some green,
to
right?
count his dervishes especially, but maybe some of the other too.
Right. Yeah, so, you know, it's a cool brew by Nick, and similar strategy. The concept was, I wonder if I could just burn my opponent out, you know, chain lightning them, detonate their stuff, eternal flame them, ball lightning them, pyrotechnics them. If they attack me, I'll disharmony. But he doesn't have a way to sack the creature. He needs Diamond Valley for his rook eggs, and Diamond Valley for his...
Where did I end up with my Crabby Red brew versus this deck? Did I fare any better than you did?
So John, yeah, let's look. If you just pull up the Horsemen website and /tournament 1, John, you came in. John Eccleberry, where are you? You came in 16th, so you were 2-1-0 at 16th.
That's
place.
Pretty good, actually.
Yeah. Out of almost 40
I would
players.
be concerned with this build from Nick about, like, how do you kill big Arabian creatures? Like, how do you kill a dip, you know, game 1?
I mean, a Serendip, you've got pyrotechnics up there.
Okay, I guess if you get to 5 mana, you could kill it.
Yeah, he's got to get to 5 mana, and he's not running Fellwar Stones, so that's another thing.
Right.
This deck needs, you know, a turn 1 Factory, a turn 2 Fellwar Stone, and a turn 3 Rook Egg. It really wants to do that, and then a turn 4, you know, Diamond Valley kind of thing. So yeah, and you know, we don't want to be overly critical because this was everyone's first attempt, and you know, everyone was just experimenting. But you can see now some of the changes that would need to be made to make these decks, you know, more competitive.
Well, and people didn't know what they'd be playing against, and so you see things like Tormod's Crypt in the side, which in other formats is kind of important to have, but there was no like reanimator strategy going on.
Well, actually there was.
I mean, there might have been like an All Hallows Eve deck or something.
Yes.
We've seen a couple.
Yeah,
All Hallows.
You missed that, John, in the first episode, but there were Daniel James had this All Hallows Tron Abyss deck, which was really strong. In this,
that one looks pretty good.
Yeah, Daniel James came in. He came in 22nd with this deck. And there was
Matt Mesa won tournament 4 with a green-black robots.
Right. Yes, that's right. He did. I think there was one more All Hallows deck too somewhere in these earlier brews. But there is at least
they're out there.
Yeah,
so, you know,
it's out there.
Yeah, and even the top deck was running. I think Arnaud, who won, was running all the Artifice with the 4 reconstruction.
Right,
so
reconstruction.
Yeah, well, there you go.
You know, recall.
I am wrong.
And recall.
Well,
that's right.
I mean, it's just even recall, but no. To your point, John, I don't think there's a ton of graveyard. There's only a few cards, you know, and it's maybe
those are good ones though.
Yeah, they are good ones.
Recall is pretty solid. Although it's funny, we don't really recall is good and reconstruction is good. We don't really see reconstruction played as much anymore, but I still kind of like it. There's Draftman's Restoration too.
Yes.
Although I don't really see people run that either.
Yeah.
But to Nick's praise here, I just think, you know, the idea, and like John, you know, great minds think alike. The idea of just going with mono red and blood moons and burn does not seem like a bad strategy. So I understand why he wanted to do that in this format with all those non-basics, and he thought, I'll just screw him with, maybe I'll get one of these blood moons down and just burn them out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, really any format that I play that I haven't played before, I just bring a pile of red cards and see what happens. And then I get a feel for the format and build something else. And then, like, you know, in this format, I ended up playing mono blue for a long time.
Right.
You know, and that was pretty good.
Yeah. And there was a Mono Blues Flyers deck that we saw when we did the first one. This one, Ian O'Connell, he was thinking on very similar lines, except for Serendib Efreet can be a big problem when you're looking at 4 mazes and if you can't strip them. But other than that, you know, this Unstable Blue Skies deck was not all that different from the Blue Steel deck that you ended up doing very well with.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's really cool to see, you know, Nick is one of the co-founders and early supporters of the format. Really cool to see his first brew, and interesting that it was the same as John's, all red. I still think that something like this has potential. You know, Diamond Valleys with Rook Eggs, Juxtaposes, things like that could still really be powerful. And the 4 Blood Moon.
I tried it a couple of times. It was a fun deck to play, but I never really felt like it was ultra competitive or anything. But like, a couple different times I tried like red-white builds that had, Preacher plus Diamond Valley plus Rook Egg and, Disharmony. And like, you're just trying to really steal and sack everything that you see.
Right.
I don't know. It's all right.
All right. Well, hats off to Nick Breyer for his Disharmony Flame Inferno and for all his early support of the 4 Horsemen. On to our next deck. Next deck is Ryan Butcher, Cleansing Tax Edge. This is an interesting brew, and we saw Cleanse show up a little while later. I thought it was really fascinating and quite insightful that Ryan recognized the potential strength of this card all the way in Tournament 1. Tim, John, thoughts on this deck?
I think triple white is really tough when you're trying to, first of all, when you don't have any duels. And secondly, you're playing a deck that really only wants to have like 1 or 2 lands out. Although this is not like the builds we saw later that have a bunch of little 1-drops to kind of accelerate the early game. He doesn't actually have any early plays, which is kind of weird. He's got things like Pyrotechnics that cost 5, like, and Fissure that costs 5. I don't know that. I guess it's just a different style. Like, he's not worried about stalling them out on fewer lands. He's more of a control-y thing where he just wants to solidify his base faster than they can, fix all of his lands. He's got things like Pendrel Veil to try to like make it hard for them to keep stuff out. He's got a lot of removal. And so I guess he's just trying to amass cards and like lean into the Ivory Towers and lean into the removal until he, gets what he needs. He's even got the little trick where you can turn their things into artifacts with Ashnod's Transmigrant and then blow it up with artifact removal. Or use like the circle of protection that he has on it. But I think overall I like the later versions that have a lot of little tiny guys to spam the board with early.
Yeah. Tim, what are your thoughts?
I think Ryan has some interesting things going on here. I think a lot of people have old school familiar with land tax Armageddon combo. So he's like, well, I don't have Geddon here, so I'll try this card, Cleansing, with land tax and try to make it work. And he tried to make it work. It's kind of a cool thing, and Cleansing does damage. It may not destroy all the lands, but it will damage your opponent. Hence the reason why I think he's running, Chain Lightning, Pyrotechnics, Land's Edge. He's trying to get all this extra burn in. And I like the Circle Protection Artifacts main deck. I think that's pretty cool that he's got one of those, 1 Dust to Dust, 2 Divine Offering. So he does have some artifact hate. I don't know if he has enough between, I guess he's got 4 Divine Offering between main and side and 2 Dust to Dust. I suppose that is a good amount of artifact destruction. But does the Book of Ras, can you prevent that with the Circle Protection artifact?
Yeah, I think so. I'd have to double check if it's paying life or it doesn't. You probably have to pay life. You probably can't. I imagine you have to pay 2 life, but let me go double check. I'll look it up.
Okay, I think that would be a cool combo. I mean, the life gain he has from Divine Offering and Ivory Tower is cool. I think that's a cool card drawing engine, but
yeah, it's pay 2 life. It's
six
it's
mana,
pay
but-
2 mana and 2 life. So yeah, you can't prevent it. But it is interesting to see the Circle Protection artifact. Imagine, just getting that one COPR out against a robots deck. Like, what would the robots deck do?
Is it 2 mana to use or 1? White and
It's
white?
2. And so I mean they could overwhelm him, I suppose, if he didn't have enough lands out. Although potentially he's going to have a lot of lands when he's pulling stuff out with land tax and trying to get stuff out. Yeah, I don't know. It's well, how did this deck do? I'm curious.
Okay, so let's look at the Tournament 1 website. So this deck is Ryan Butcher. So Ryan came in 24th, 1-2-0 with this.
Okay.
Didn't do
I
too
like
great.
he's got the Urza's Chalice in his sideboard too. That's an interesting. It's kind of like an ivory cup, life gain for. Was it when you cast an artifact? or-
Yeah.
Yeah, once per artifact when you cast it.
Well, and to John's point earlier, although we've always allowed proxies, a lot of our players prefer to not use proxies. And so, this deck here, as far as I can see, every one of these cards, except for one card in the sideboard, what is that, Lifeblood down there?
Lifeblood. I like that sideboard card
Yeah.
too against.
All of these
like
look
the last
real.
Two, the
Yeah.
2 mono red decks we saw, that would be really good.
Yeah, the Lifeblood is an interesting card that we've just hardly ever seen. Same for COP artifacts and the cleansing. Like, there are some cards, they're really cool cards here, but I think all the cards except for that proxy Lifeblood are real. And when you only play with cards you own, it can be a little more limiting. But pretty cool deck by Ryan Butcher here. I think with some tweaking and some modifications, this could be a little bit more competitive and focused. But really cool to see this as his first brew here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next deck, Rasmus Olsen. Rasmus has played with us for a long time. He hasn't played recently, but he was an early supporter. He's from the Drain Life crew over in Europe. And really nice guy, super friendly. And he brewed, I think, a pretty spicy red and robots deck. What do you guys think of this spicy brew here?
There's been a lot of twists on this. He leans into the 3 drops too. So he's got the Ball Lightning, but he's also got the Yidwins, which I really, really like. I think Yidwin's a sweet card.
Yeah.
It's so almost impossible to kill. I mean, you can get rid of it, but it's pretty great. And then he's got the quadruple play statue, so he's leaning into that a bit. I kind of like these Aladdins down here. That's not something you really see anybody play most of the time. But yeah, this is cool. And the 2 relic barriers are really nice too against a field of artifacts.
Yeah, I think Aladdin could be cool against like you said, mono blue artifice, where the only way they can really kill the Aladdin is with like a trike, and so he has 2 artifact blasts to counter those Triskelions, and then the Aladdin. I could see that could work. That could work, unless they get that 1 city in a bottle for the Aladdin. That would be interesting, and even a couple relic barriers because he expected to see tons of other artifacts. It also taps down Mishra's Factory from blocking or attacking, which it's pretty cool, actually. Now that I think about it, you could run like Atog in a deck like this with 4 relic barriers main deck. That could maybe, I don't know, if you run into an Arabian aggro, maybe not, but a couple is nice.
Yeah, he's got exactly 40 cards in the main block of the deck. He's got 11 mountains down there. I can't exactly tell how many strip mines, deserts, and workshops he's running. I have to assume he's running 4 workshops, right?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it's one
not
label
labeled as
workshop.
such. I mean, I think you might just have the 1.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's tough to tell. In some of these early deck photos, not everyone showed their land count, I noticed. And some folks were missing a sideboard, which we're missing a sideboard here on Rasmus's deck. He didn't brew a sideboard and didn't play one, which I thought was funny.
Listen, the deck that I won Tournament 3 with didn't have a sideboard either.
Yeah. you know. But yeah, it's cool to see the thinking here, combining the aggression of the red direct damage, but then the power of the robots with the workshops and the factories and all that. And Rasmus was keen on understanding that, hey, being able to have 4 mazes, well, if I get one of these early game and there's no Blood Moon, then I'm going to be golden. And if there is Blood Moon, I don't even care, because then I have more red to power my Yidwins and Ball Lightnings. So, I mean, it's pretty cool brew.
Mm-hmm. So I play in a few fringe formats that have Fallen Empires in them, and so you get access to Aliapile, and that card is just like every place because every deck can play it, and it's like really handy to be able to pick off little guys. But you know, like Tim said, in this format, it's if you're not playing red, it's kind of hard to get rid of some of these little guys that have cool abilities. It always makes me laugh when you see kind of ridiculous plays. There is the blue card, Psychic Purge, that could do 1 to any target for 1 blue, but most people aren't going to be playing that. But I once was playing in a tournament where I blue blasted, or I red blasted a Psychic Purge that was pointed at my Preacher, and my Preacher was like my only win con. I was attacking with it for 1 damage a turn. And like, just completely ridiculous things like that in Old School happen. And you don't really see that in other Magic. And Horsemen's full of that kind of stuff.
Right on, John. Hey, imagine running Psychic Purge in your mono red sideboard, and your opponent goes to Chains of Mephistopheles, Winds of Change, or Amnesia you, and you discard like 2 purges and you hit him for 10 damage in your red burn deck.
I love it.
Yeah, really cool deck by Rasmus here. Just looking over at the website. So Rasmus came in pretty low. He came in at 33rd. He went 0-3 and 0 with this deck. So didn't do too great. And he probably got some really tough matchups. But really cool thinking. And we do see a lot of these cards show up in other decks later. So cool to see Rasmus's Rook Maze Lightning Burn deck.
It's tough when you have like those colorless lands, but then you're running 8 triple red cards. Like you really have to like kind of make choices early that sometimes feel like they sting. You know, like you're like, you draw one of those and you're like, oh, I should have played the mountain instead of the factory, or I don't know. It's a little bit tough. It's a little hard to play around, but I still really like the build.
Yeah. Well, okay, so our next deck is Rob Hackney. Rob didn't actually take a real cards deck photo. I mean, all these deck photos were uploaded into Teleria, and we have the digital version. This is from Manastack. I use Manastack and like it quite a lot because I like the deck pictures that it produces and the way it lays out the cards. This is a type of deck that we saw a ton of throughout all the early tournaments. Blue green and red blue green. What do you guys think of this brew by Rob?
This deck looks really fast and just really, really consistent. As long as he can draw the correct mana, I imagine with 4 tropical islands, this deck would be so much better. But you still have the 4 City of Brass. I mean, the Pendlehaven, the factories look really cool when you have the Sylvan Sinbad engine to fetch all these special, in the 4 strip mines, you can just sit there and fetch all these special lands. You just need to get blue and green early. That's the one thing I see. And notice there's no mana drain though.
No mana drain, no remove soul, no force spike, no counter spells of any kind.
No fat. You don't want to like draw a card that's not doing anything for you in the moment. Like you just want to play. It's all gas is what it is. I mean, I know that those cards are really good. Although it's funny because you look at the sideboard, and he did make room for some of that stuff in the board, but not in the main deck. The main deck is just like straight gas. You're just playing stuff, turning them sideways. It was a pretty potent deck. There's a version of this, I believe, won tournament too.
It looks really good, actually. The curve looks really good. the creatures are very efficient. I mean, just putting a 4/4 unstable on turn 2, unless they have a maze of it, but even then you've got strip mine, can be devastating early. The one thing though, I would think like if he included even in the sideboard like force spike or mana drain or to stop like a moat, even though he has, I guess he has like maybe he has 16 flyers, maybe he doesn't need moat, but maybe to stop like the abyss, right? Like concordant crossroads or something, or a world enchantment for the abyss. Other than that, I think this deck looks really good. Something like this seems strong.
Yeah, I would say one of the challenges this deck runs into is if your opponent gets a workshop on turn 1 and a workshop on turn 2, or even a workshop and a Thelwar Stone turn 1 and a Clockwork Avian turn 2, you're staring at a 4/4 flyer, and all of a sudden your flyers can't get through, and you can't do anything about that until you either get a Scavenger Folk or an Unstable. There's so many powerful things with the robot decks that they can do. They can crank out, Triskelions on turn 2 if you get a workshop turn 1 and a workshop turn 2, and the Triskelion wipes out all your Scavenger Folk and your all the small dudes except for your pixies. It's very, very, very devastating when you come up against the Triskelions when you got these weenie decks.
Well, you just run into the problem where like it's the classic aggro problem. Like you're hyper aggressive early, and you beat in for a considerable amount of damage, but you don't quite seal the deal.
Right.
And then other decks can just stabilize, against you, and all of a sudden you just like lose control of the game and don't ever get there.
Right.
I mean, I think that this deck's pretty aggressive and pretty good though. Like this is a very good version of this. Later on, much later on, several tournaments later, I tried playing a version of this, and I ran into that problem where, there were a lot of, the decks that basically are just full of X4 flyers. And if they start jamming those, all of a sudden, like, you just don't have an avenue to get any damage in at all.
Yeah, it can be real tough. And Rob Hackney's known as a very strong player in lots of other formats. And if we look over at the Tournament 1 website on 4horsemenmagic.com, Rob Hackney came in, he was in top 8, so he came in at number 7 with a 2-1-0 record. So he made it in top 8 and battled it out. And if you look at the brackets, it looks like he got knocked out by Roberto Manzini's deck, and we'll cover his deck here in a little bit. But really cool brew by Rob Hackney, and I think Rob played through tournaments 3 or 4 and was supportive of the format in the early days. And Rob's since won, I think he won the Summer Derby or something like that, and he's won a bunch of other tournaments. So super strong player, and no surprise to see this kind of brew in tournament number 1 of 4 Horsemen. Speaking of Roberto Manzini, so this is the deck that beat Rob Hackney's deck. Look what Roberto's running, John. It's mono blue skies control.
Yeah, it's pretty solid. I mean, he's got some pretty good counters to that. He's got a lot of the same creatures, so he's going to have, the ability to either trade or bounce with things.
Well, he's got Azure Drake. The Azure Drake is far superior to Serendib Efreet in many ways. At least
I mean, Serendib's still really good and aggressive, but like if you get into a stalemate, it feels pretty bad to be just taking that damage when you can't swing in. And he's also playing, some cards that I really like that I've really leaned into, like the Force Spikes and the Boomerangs.
Yeah.
Those things can really out-tempo some of the other decks.
Right. And if you get in trouble with your Serendib Efreets and you're in this, stalemate scenario where your opponent's got a couple of Serendibs, you can bounce yours back if you have to, if they get Spirit Linked or if you're at a standoff. And then their Serendibs are damaging them, and you can Maze of Ith or block with your Azure Drakes, and they're taking damage and you're not.
Yeah, this deck, this like Rob's deck, this also looks like a really strong blue-based aggro, except he does it without the green. He's just mono, so it just screams like even more consistent, possibly.
Yeah.
You're not worried about Blood Moon. You're not really worried about Moat. The Abyss, he's like, okay, I can Mana Drain, I can Boomerang, I can Force Spike. The Hercules is kind of cool, he could save his own factories if they're trying to blow those up, or he could just bounce all their stuff back, and
he can bounce all those Tetravis tokens out and get in for a huge hit.
And then there's the Time Elementals. I'm a big fan of blue tempo. So you have the aggression of the unstable and the little guys, and then you have the tempo cards and the Force Spike, remove soul, bounce. But he's got all the good tempo blue cards with the good mana curve aggro package. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty solid. And I do like the Force Spikes and the Boomerangs. The Boomerangs have proven themselves even early, as well as modern day Four Horsemen. The Boomerangs are just absolutely such a great utility. They're instant. They can bounce problematic enchantments. They can bounce your creatures back. They can get rid of your opponent's blockers. They're so useful. And that's another card you never see played hardly in any format. And in Four Horsemen, they really shine.
I'm surprised, though, not to see more guys running like Mana Drain into Amnesia combo. Like, I don't know if you turn, especially with a mono blue deck like this, if you play turn 2, maybe turn 2 Mana Drain's not really that feasible with 8 or 9 colorless lands, but if you play a Mana Drain, you could Amnesia on turn 3 in mono blue.
Yeah, it's true. And John had Mana Drains in some of his mono blue skies decks.
Like, specifically Amnesia to back the Mana Drain just seems like it would be ridiculous.
Right, it's very tempting. And I think that could be a whole strategy unto itself. What do you think about Roberto Manzini's sideboard?
The Mind Bomb is all the other cards seem pretty straightforward to me. The Fluxes, the anti-red Flash Flood, the extra flash counter, the Hercules for artifact, the Maze, I get it, but the Mind Bomb is the cool card. I guess he's just like, I want to have a blue burn spell, kind of like, and 3 damage for 1 blue.
Like, if he brings it in at all, like, what does he side out for that card? Like, I don't. Maybe the Force Spikes and the flash counter. Like, if he feels like he's playing against a deck that they're not good against. Like, I don't know, but like, I think they're fun. Like, it's cool that they're there, but I'm just trying to figure out like what
Hercules, maybe a Hercules against a non-artifact deck or something like a mirror.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know what he would board. Maybe he would board out some of the dibs. Against, like, if he thinks they're gonna play, this like a City in a Bottle transmute deck or something, or just 4 Maze of Ith deck. He's like, I got to get rid of these dibs. I'm up against 4 Maze of Ith kind of thing.
They are kind of aggressive, though. I mean, usually browbeat cards are kind of bad because your opponent's going to do whatever's better for them. But in a deck like this, if you're like chipping in for a ton of damage early, and you're really putting them in a spot where they don't want to lose that life, and you just like hit them for some cards, like, that doesn't seem that awful. I don't know, I like it.
It could work.
The Mind Bomb could be interesting in a red-blue aggro deck for basically like another Chain Lightning to the opponent, right?
If you combine it with Chain and Pyrotechnics, and
right,
unstable.
It might be a little bit, just enough edge to give the burn a little more burn.
Sounds like you're ready to brew up a red-blue deck for the next Tournament 21 Wild West. Right?
I'm having just as many problems as you, Tim. Like, number one, I haven't been playing in a lot of the Four Horsemen tournaments because I've been running them, and it's hard to run these things and play in them. But number two, we've had so many new players, lots of new faces, and I think it's cool to let the new players explore the format, and a lot of the more seasoned folks, are out there crushing it. And so I haven't decided what to play, and I think I'll probably just play something that's kind of well-rounded, but not particularly, spiky. That's my plan.
All right.
But really cool brew by Roberto Manzini. And like I said, Roberto made it into the top 8. He was he faced off against Rob Hackney in the quarterfinals, and he won that match. And he faced Michael Scheffenacker in the semifinals and lost to Michael Scheffenacker. So this deck here by Roberto Manzini did quite well in the tournament overall. All right, our next deck, we're getting close to the last few decks here. Stephen Goblin King running Rook Tower Tax Edge. Stephen Goblin King, what do you guys think of this red-white Tower Tax Edge brew?
It's another deck that could really use a Diamond Valley.
Yeah, definitely. Or 2. Yeah, Diamond Valley just wasn't on people's radar yet, you know? The Diamond Valley Rook Egg combo is phenomenal. And, you know, gaining the extra 3 life makes a difference over time. And folks just weren't onto it. Plus, he's got the Preachers in the board, so Diamond Valley works really well with Preacher. Yeah, it just wasn't on a lot of people's radar yet.
And there's the Disharmony over there in the board as well.
So Disharmony was on the radar. And, you know, Diamond Valley works great with Disharmony. I had a deck called Disharmony Valley, like around tournament, 11 or 12 or something, where I just thought, wow, if you go all in on, Rook Eggs and Preacher and Disharmony and Diamond Valley and Safe Haven, you can just, like John was saying, you can steal everything, own everything, sack everything. It's pretty strong.
It's interesting to see that single Spirit Link in the board. Like, they're thinking, well, is Spirit Link good or is it not good? I haven't decided.
I was just about to comment the same thing, John. Like, I haven't seen a lot of Spirit Link in a lot of these decks. There's just one in the sideboard, like you said, but you beat me to it. And it's like, why are people not running it? I don't know.
I mean, later on, it's a pretty ubiquitous 4 but early on, not so much.
Yeah, I do like the one Felden's Cane he's got. I haven't seen a lot of folks running that main deck, but with the Tax Edge engine, it's kind of cool, I think, to recur. Like, if you discard all those basics and you still can't finish off your opponent, you can shuffle them all back in and then re-tax them out and do it all over again.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, when I was playing Kitchen Table Magic as a kid, like, everybody had a Felden's Cane in their deck. That was just a card that was, ever present. And it's fun to see it come up again, but certainly it's been somewhat abused in this format with these land tax combos where they can cycle their deck over and over. Neat to see it here in Tournament 1 for sure. This deck's not super refined, but it certainly knew where it was coming from. I mean, if you look at this versus some of the other Tax Edge builds, I think this one had a pretty good idea of what it was doing with the main deck. The sideboard's a little all over the place, but they're trying to kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of fun ofs there, and there's a lot of just kind of trying to have an answer for every archetype they're going to play against.
Yeah, and one good answer, I mean, obviously they had Mana Drain to answer recycling decks like Kane Recycle, but it is neat to see some guys running the Artifact Blast as a good answer to the Kane, which is still a good answer. I'm actually a fan of Artifact Blast. And with all these Triskelion decks, these robots, both then and T1 and now and even in T20 and T21, I still think Artifact Blast should possibly see more play in Four Horsemen.
Well, it's cheap. It's like it's not a big commitment to play a one cost spell. And it's something that allows, red to have an ability that it typically wouldn't have. And it stops, like, Trike from coming down. Because normally, Trike, if it hits the board, it doesn't matter if you have artifact removal. They can still fire off the arms. But if you counter it, it's just gone. So, like, I don't know. I do like it. I don't play it as often as I probably should. But I think it's a card that's definitely worth looking at in this format.
The Festival here is interesting. That's the one sideboard card that I'm like, what's that about?
It's like a fog, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, I know what it is. I know that it says that I still want to see somebody build Season of the Witch with Festival that says all their creatures are destroyed that didn't attack, and you play Festival, and it's better than Fog in that regard because it actually says they cannot declare an attack.
Opponent may not declare an attack this turn. Play only during opponent's upkeep phase.
Yeah, so they can't attack, and if you, I want to see Season of the Witch Festival. It's basically like a Wrath of God effect.
That's pretty cool.
We did see later on, Damian Bursman brewed like a Holy Light Martyr.
Martyr's Cry.
Martyr's Cry type, or Heaven's Gate Martyr's Cry deck, which is pretty cool. But you know, what I do like about Steven's deck here, he's got the 4 Failware Stones. He knew he needed to ramp up to the Rook Eggs as fast as possible. So he can get a turn 3 Rook Egg, he can get a turn 3 Moat. Yep. That's pretty strong, because now he's got air, he's got ground covered for sure. And if he gets a Chain Lightning, he can chain his own rooks and they can fly over Moat. Or he's got a couple mazes to back up the Moat. That one of Pyrotechnics, and he's going to lean into the land tax. You know, he didn't cheap on land tax. You see some folks putting in, you know, 3 land tax or 2 land tax. Steven knew, I got to get land tax, I got to get Ivory Tower, I got to get Rook Egg, and I got to have my Fell Wars. So all the critical things he had them, and look, he's got the critical set hosers. He's running the Golgothian Cylex and the City in a Bottle main, which I think is very smart.
I like that. Yeah,
yep.
I like that. And he could power out that Cylex on turn 3 as well.
Yeah, and the Fellwar Stones are from the dark, not from Antiquities. So, you know, he's not going to be killing anything except for Mistress Factory when it comes to Antiquities, right? Or, well, actually, he'll kill Ivory Tower and the Factory. Yeah. Those are the things he'll kill. So he would probably need to, you know, be wise about when he plays that. But if he comes up against a massive robots deck, at least he has this out, because he is not running. He's not running like Dust to Dust main. He's running it in the side. He's not running Shatterstorm, but he does have the 4 Divine Offering, and the Divine Offering also protect him against early factories and things like that. So I think Steven was really onto something here, and it just so happens, if we toggle over to the website, if we look at the results, Steven came in 4th place at 3-0-0 with this deck.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that's really good. Well.
Yeah, and Steven Steven faced off against Peter in the quarterfinals and went on to the semifinals. He played Arnold in the semifinals and lost to Arnold 2-1. So he did get a win off of Arnold. And Arnold went on to beat Michael for first place in the finals. So this deck here is pretty strong and had to have been piloted extremely wisely by Steve and Goblin King.
Yeah, it could have been one of the best decks in the tournament, actually. But I look at that Festival in the sideboard. That's the odd one. I'm curious if I could have heard from Steven Goblin King. Did he use that? What was that against, or what was he expecting, you know, when he thought to put that in his board? Was it like a anti-Eureka Concordant Crossroads? And I'm wondering, you know, also we haven't seen many Eureka decks. I haven't seen any yet.
No, we haven't seen any. I don't think anyone played Eureka in Tournament 1, to be honest. And we haven't seen it in any of these deck reviews so far.
Interesting.
Wild. Also, with all this red, you would think you would see more Shatterstorm, but I haven't seen very many. Maybe there were in the first half.
Yeah, right. There's been a few in the sideboards. There's usually been like 1 or 2 in the decks that that had red. We do see Greater Realm of Preservation, though. There's one of here in this deck, and we've seen it in a couple of the other decks too. And people knew that Greater Realm could be strong against red or black. But really cool brew by Steven Goblin King, Rook Tower Tax Edge, making it into the top 8 with this and into the semifinals. So hats off to Steven for brewing a pretty spicy competitive deck in Tournament 1.
Greater Realm is actually a card that it's funny that you whipped up a black-red deck right after this too. but Greater Realm is a card that I just kind of wish wasn't in the format. Like, yeah. I don't want to ban it or anything, but like, we're like, oh cool, you know, Alpha's gone, I don't have to worry about Circular Protection. Oh wait, two out of 5 colors are turned off by this like single card. Pretty
Yeah,
annoying.
people forget how powerful the COPs really are.
I mean, even in in other old school formats, when the comp red drops, it's like the only out that a red deck has is like they have either a chaos orb or they have to board in other cards that will deal damage to their opponents, like artifacts or mana barbs. I think rocket launcher and trikes are really good answers to cards like that for red.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Rocket launcher, man. That's a card that should probably be seeing some play in for Horsemen.
It is. It's seen play in the latter decks, particularly the decks that Tim is building.
I did really well with it in a tournament before, and then there's a Tron deck in the finals that for Gilio, I believe. Is that how you say it?
Yes. Yeah.
He's playing, and he's in the finals with.
He's going to the finals with his Tron deck. Yeah, he's got a couple of them. Okay, so for our next deck, guys, and we're getting close to the end here. These are all in alphabetical order, so there's only a few left. Tony Spina. Tony played an Underworld aggro burn deck with a transformation sideboard. What do you guys think of this brew?
Oh, let's see. What's he got on his board? Just a bunch of artifact dudes. I mean, I like this. It's aggressive. It's got cheap creatures. I think black has some of the best cheap guys in the format, and we don't see a lot of that deck, but every once in a while we see somebody try to make it work. For a long time, I had a mono black that I didn't really run it in any of the tournaments, but I tested it against a lot of different things and got a lot of reps in with it. You see some of the really good ones here. Like, I really like the Raiders and the Ogress. They're both solid 2-drops, and there's not a lot of great 2-drops in this format, but those ones are both good. Yeah, I like this. I think it's pretty good. It's pretty in your face. It's all removal or direct damage or cheap creatures. Everything's pretty efficient. There's nothing above. Well, I guess the pyrotechnics cost 5, but that's kind of your finisher, right? That's the top end. The transitional sideboard's kind of interesting. Do you just take out all the weenies to bring all that stuff in? Or, I don't know, maybe the Underworld Dreams and
maybe he's worried about, like you said, your card, Greater Realm of Preservation. Maybe if he thinks they're playing white and they're going to have that, he has to bring in Artifice creatures for black creatures.
Well,
yeah, that's fair.
And also, like he's not running any artifacts main deck. So if any of his opponents notice, man, this guy doesn't have Factory, he doesn't have, any artifacts, they're going to sideboard out all their artifact hate, right? And then he can sideboard in all his robots and they won't have any answers for it.
That's a very good observation there, Chad. Yeah, they're right. That's right. It's transformational. Yeah.
Like, he's onto something here with this particular, because there's all kinds of ways to do transformation board, but also there's all kinds of cards that answer the weenies. John hit the nail on the head. Like, he's tried the black aggro, mono black, red black, green black, these have been tried. And the problem is, as soon as Triskelion hits the board or Pyrotechnics or even a Falling Star, it just wipes you out, and you'll get 3 for 1 or 4 for 1. And so if he comes up against a Falling Star deck or a deck that has Pyrotechnics or a deck that has, a ton of artifact hate, and they see none of it here, he's got lots of options to transform against those decks that he's going to come up against.
Yeah, and it's a very cool answer to the Greater Realm of Preservation board and those, like all those colorless damage source. Another cool card that mono red could use, John, for because it requires white mana only. What about Quorum? The Quorum Trench Gnomes. Is that how you say it? That makes their planes produce only red.
Oh yeah, that's kind of interesting.
If you turn off the red and you have Blood Moons, and then you turn off any other planes they have, they can no longer get the mana to use the enchantment.
We saw the Quorum Trench Gnome.
Quite a workaround.
It is, but it could mana screw them pretty good.
Yeah, that's interesting.
We saw the Quorum Trench Gnome in one of the sideboards in an earlier deck. I mean, it does cost 4. It's 3 and a red for a 1/1. You tap it, and it says target plane produces a colorless instead of white until end of game. So, I mean, it could definitely stop white decks over a long period of time if they can't get rid of it.
And does that stay in play even if he leaves play? Does that counter remain?
It says until end of game.
Yeah. So it's like technically, I mean, it's kind of color screwing your opponent, for a long while. It's a little better than Cyclopean Tomb in that regard.
Right. Well, I mean, I kind of like this deck. You know, he's not running all the colorless lands in the factories. He's just got the City of Brass and the swamps and the mountains. So it's a more simplified mana base that's focused. He does have that one Blood Moon and Gravity Sphere in his board. You know, I think this is another deck where the player looks like they're playing with all real cards and cards that they own, no proxies. So maybe this isn't like 100% optimized, but certainly pretty cool brew. Just to look at the performance of this deck, let me look over at the site real quick. So Tony Spina came in 17th, right next to you, John. You came in 16th. He ran 2-1-0 with this deck.
Oh, wow,
Nice.
That's pretty good. I like that. He's got a nice looking build with a nice curve.
Yeah, pretty solid. All right, so hats off to Tony Spina for his Underworld aggro burn in 4 Horsemen Tournament 1. Okay, we're getting close to wrapping up things with the final few decks. That's Triflin's Sylvan Tax Edge. Green, white, red. Guys, what do you think of this brew?
Another Tax Edge deck, man. There were a bunch of them, but I get it. It's really funny though, because we've come all the way around to like some really refined builds of this that still have not made it all the way.
Right.
We've had it go to the finals, I think once,
Twice.
But never quite takes down the tournament. The Sylvan Library here is kind of cool. I mean, that card's super powerful, but at the same time, with no dual land, like, I guess he's got the City of Brass. But, you know, I don't know. The card selection's pretty powerful. I guess I can't argue with it, although it feels a little shoehorned in when you're already playing 2 other colors and you're trying to stay on color. But it's good. What is that card? Is it just another falling star? It must just be a proxy falling star under or maybe,
I think that's 2 falling stars there under the Chain Lightnings, right?
Yeah, Falling Star is a pretty good answer to all the little aggro guys that might be coming, and I see some Drop of Honeys in the sideboard as well. So that green's allowing him access to some other interesting things. Like, look at those 4 Urnums in the board.
Yeah.
Like,
Informational again.
Yeah, just jump out. You know, people are not expecting that from this deck at all. They think they know what they're playing against, and then you can start just like jamming stuff like that.
Well, they're going to board out their creature hate, right? Because they're like, oh, he's playing Tax Edge, and I didn't even see any factories, right? He's not even playing Mistress Factories. So, yeah, they're going to board out their creature hate and income Urnum Gens. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like it.
These, all these old school spicy players here in this tournament, they're all full of tricks up their sleeves and their sideboards, a lot of them.
Yeah, it's true. And that's what's kind of fascinating about, you know, a lot of these early brewers. A lot of these players played in like the first 3 or 4 tournaments. And, you know, we see a few names that are still around, like Damian Bursman and a few others that have been playing since the very beginning. But these guys were thinking on a lot of cool levels with a lot of innovation, a lot of tricks, like you were saying, Tim. Transformation boards. You know, what I like about this deck is it's very, very focused. I mean, it's so focused that he's not even really doubling down on Chain Lightning. He's splitting his few extra slots between a couple of Winds of Change, not 4, a couple of Chains Lightnings, not 4, and a couple of Falling Stars. Focusing instead on tax, on land tax. Got to have 4, got to get it early, right? Sylvan Library, he really knew the power of Sylvan Library, and he was taking no chances of not getting his Land's Edge when he needed it, which we've seen that happen to a lot of players who only have 2 or 3 Land's Edge. They have everything set up, and then they can't pull the combo, and they lose before they can, you know, get it to fire off. So that's Strifelin here really made sure that the deck was focused, and he's also one of the first folks we've seen really playing Drop of Honey. You see the Drop of Honey in his board?
Yeah, I think John mentioned that. I see it.
We didn't see a lot of Drop of Honey in these early decks, and what we found out now is Drop of Honey is freaking brutal. It is an absolute powerhouse in this format.
Yeah, this deck looks really strong. I expected that Strifelin did quite well with this. It looks very, I guess you'd say, spiky. I don't see any. I don't really see any spice cards. Yeah. I just see spike. Yeah, it looks strong.
Right. Well, and so let's take a look at the results. So no surprise, that's Strifelin came in at 6th place. He went 3-0 with this deck. There were only a few other players, Arnold Avenel, Michael Scheffenacker, Roberto Manzini, and Stephen Goblin King, decks we've covered today, except for Arnold's. Those guys all went 3-0, and that's Strifelin went 3-0 in making 6th place in the top 8 with this particular Tax Edge brew. So we're really seeing the robots and Tax Edge were dominating the top 8. Really cool brew by That's Strifelin, Sylvan Tax Edge, top 8 in it. It looks like That's Strifelin. I think let me look at the brackets. He faced off against Arnold Avenel in the quarterfinals and was knocked out by Arnold. And super cool brew by him. Victor Erasis is our next deck, and I think this is the last one. So this is the last deck of the night and the video. Victor Erasis, Colossal Robots Dib Control. What do you guys think of this brew?
I mean, Colossus is a pretty cool thing to end on. I always think it's fun to see that card come up. I played 1 or 2 copies in my tournament 3 deck that won. It was not necessary to be there. Like, Trike is fine. Just playing the other 6-drop artifact guys, playing Clockwork Avians, whatever, it's good enough. You don't really need Colossus. It's definitely a spice card, but it's a fun thing to play. And also, when you've got access to multiple Maze Abyths, it really starts to get good, because if you can drop one, you can attack with it and then maze it after combat damage and, bust in with it every turn. So, pretty cool.
Yeah, I think John touched on most of the things I was looking at. When you have 3 workshops and 4 mana drain, or 4 workshops if you wanted, and then even transmuting one of your big 6 drops, it's not out of reach. The Colossus is not too hard to cast, actually.
Well, especially if you're transmuting like a Trike that's already shot off its arms. It's just a little 1/1 sitting there, and then you turn it into a 9/9 trampler. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, and the maze gives it vigilance, or all the other robots in the format. A mana drain, you might hit something for 4 or 6 mana a lot of times, even. Untap, and you just need 5 more mana to play. What's Colossus? 9 mana?
9 mana, yeah.
Just 5 more, and so it's not out of reach. I expected to see more Abyss with robots, but strangely enough, we've seen a lot of blue-red and blue robots, but not much black with Abyss with robots. Which is, this deck is, so he goes for the Abyss, but he also has dibs. I guess just because it's dib, right? You can just get it down, and they might just go all the way. But
you can just do its work and don't worry about it. Abyss is so potent with the robots, but at the same time, there's no other black cards really to play. I mean, I guess they could play Greed would be pretty good, although I don't see anybody doing it in any of these lists. I don't know.
A couple things that really shock me, or that stand out to me in the sideboard. Yeah, the Colossus are spicy, but check out here's Psychic Allergy making an appearance. I don't know that I've seen that in any other deck. I used to play that card in 1994 when I was a teenager, like freshman in high school. And I played it with, I wanted to win with that card so bad.
I think in our original deck reviews. If you go back and look at the Tournament 1 videos, I think Brian Weissman and I were looking at this and we're like, what is that card?
Psychic allergy. It's like choose a color and they take damage equal to the number of permanents.
But we're like, this thing costs 5 mana, double blue. It's an enchantment, and it says, the new wording is, as Psychic Allergy enters the battlefield, choose a color. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Psychic Allergy deals X damage to that player, where X is equal to the number of permanents of the chosen color that they control.
It's sick, Chad, with Mana Drain. It's like, I mean, you play the Mana Drain, you untap, and the Psychic Allergy, you just tap the 2 islands, you just cast the Mana Drain.
But I didn't finish reading the card, though. There's a really horrible drawback. At the beginning of your upkeep, destroy Psychic Allergy unless you sacrifice 2 islands.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. Here's how you make it work. You're playing, imagine your blue-red Mind Bomb, Chain Lightning. I don't know. This deck, he's got a finisher. He's trying to finish them off with his trice. You know, if he gets them low, he's got to have the trike and this. And obviously, he needs to finish them off in just a couple of turns because you're not going to be able to sacrifice more than like probably 4 islands late in the game.
Yeah.
But imagine a scenario where he has his opponent at like, you know, less than 10 damage. And they have a few black creatures or red creatures or white, whatever, you know, these monocolored decks that he boards it in, and he shoots off his trike arms, and then they take a couple, you know, 3 damage from the Psychic Allergy and 3 more damage, and all of a sudden they've taken 9 in 2 turns, and he wins.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that scenario, but that's a lot of what ifs, and it's definitely a late game thing, and he's got so many more ways to win. Like, I would just like to see Fortress Skellions in this deck. I don't know why he's running 3.
Because maybe he wanted to win with the Psychic, because it's 4 Horsemen. Like, I want to win with the Psychic Allergy.
Oh,
right?
But then it shouldn't have been in the board. It should have been in the main deck.
Maybe he's just spicing it up. Well, you know, he can't win against robots with it. It won't do any damage. But he thinks, if I can catch somebody playing monocolored stuff that has, like, land tax and Spirit Links down, you know, and all these other enchantments.
Well, but you hit,
you know,
you hit on something there, Tim. This is another. We've seen a lot of robots decks, and we've seen a lot of tax edge decks. Right, those have been the dominant themes. And one thing that a lot of these guys knew is they knew they were going to be facing off against a lot of other robots decks. And one of the things that has surprised me in each of these decks is there are answers. For example, Victor running black here, he's running blights in his sideboard. Instead of running these crazy Psychic Allergies, he could have been running a couple of the black card that lets you sack creatures and destroy an artifact. What is that card?
Gate to Phyrexia.
Gate to Phyrexia. He could have been running a couple of Gate to Phyrexia, and that would give him a way to sack his Serendibs.
He can't win with Gate to Phyrexia.
No, but it can help him. It can help him in the
mirror.
In the mirror matchup, right?
It is strong, Chad. That would be a fine card. Blight is kind of, you know, he's got the Blight, but he only has 4
Blight,
swamps.
but I don't like the Psychic Allergy. I think it's crazy.
At double black, and I was wondering, like, how do you do Blight with 4 basic swamps, and that's it?
Yeah, that is hard, right? But he's not running the City of Brass either. So, you know, if he does have the Felwar Stones, almost everyone else is running City of Brass. So the Felwar Stones could potentially give him the black mana.
There you go.
But yeah, I think that there with some tweaks, this deck could be better. But you're right; it's got a lot of spice. It's got a lot of fun. It's got the Colossus. It may not be perfectly tuned. I do like the fact he's got the Tetravite tokens, John. I don't know if you noticed that along the bottom, but this was way before you were printing and giving out those tokens, and Victor had some already of his own.
Yeah, he must have gone onto the same website and found those images and printed them off. Pretty cool.
He was also hip to Force Spike. I mean, Force Spike is such a sneaky little cheeky card that can seem really cheesy, but in a lot of scenarios can be very strong. And
well, with the workshop, doesn't it work like this? So Force Spike says counter unless you pay 1. The workshop won't pay for the Force Spike. Is that not correct?
Well,
the workshop can't pay for the Force Spike.
Because workshop can only mana from the workshop can only be used to cast artifacts.
Right, and so it doesn't make their artifact cost one more, it just says counter it unless they pay one. Like if it said increases the casting cost by one, I could see them using work. So if they got extra colors floating from workshops, they can't pay for that force spike.
That's right. They'd have to have an extra regular land in order to do that.
Right.
So that might be one of the answers for the mirror match, is the force spike.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking, Chad, one last comment about that spicy allergy. Say he's worried about, what am I going to do if I go up against circle protection artifacts, right? And we see that that's a thing, and people were running it main deck, some people. He's got the Sword of the Ages as a workaround, possibly? Yeah. Or is that a...
Yeah, that's Sword of the Ages down there.
And then he has the allergy. Maybe he thought I could get around the circle protection artifacts with this psychic allergy.
Yeah, I mean, it is true. Sword of the Ages, in certain scenarios, you fling all your creatures at your opponent and they take a bunch of damage. Like, it could be a really cool finisher. And I do think that's a spicy card.
Yeah, neat deck. What a cool take on robots.
Yeah, really cool. And this deck, actually, if we go look at the website here, so Victor Erasis. It's funny that, you guys joining in this part 2, Victor Erasis also made top 8. A lot of the decks we've covered just coincidentally have made top 8 that are alphabetically. The only guy that we didn't cover today was Arnold Avenel, and he was the first Robots deck that you and I covered, Tim. Everyone else, top 8 guys were Stephen Goblin King, Peter, Arnold, That's Triflin, Michael Scheffenacker, Victor Erasis, Rob Hackney, and Roberto Manzini. And Victor was top 8. He faced off against Michael Scheffenacker and was knocked out in the top 8 there by Michael.
I wish we could ask Victor to comment in on this video at some point. How were the psychic allergies? You made top 8? You did really well. Did you win any games with psychic allergy or do much damage with them?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I think Victor's from Australia, and I think he signed up for Four Horsemen 21, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
Sweet.
He did. He's an Australian guy. He was one of the first Australians, and he's back in for this next.
Maybe he'll listen and comment on this sometime and let us know.
Yeah, let us know in the comments, Victor. All right. Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Tim, for joining me for part 2 of this video. It was kind of fun to take this trip down memory lane and check out all these old decks. For our viewers, if you want to join in all the Wild Wild West original Four Horsemen old school action, check us out at fourhorsemenmagic.com. Tournament 21 starts in a couple weeks, May 16th through June 22nd. We'd love to have you join us. And with that, we will be signing off for the evening. Thank you, guys, and we'll see y'all next time.
Good night, guys. See you, John. See you, Chad. That was fun. Thanks.
Yeah, it was a good one.